2023. I'm actually filming this on New Year's Eve day, right after I filmed my 2022 wrap up. And I just wanted to now wrap up December. It's kind of, I didn't want the month to get lost in it being a new year. So I'm gonna hopefully go through this fairly quickly. I'm hoping this will be a relatively short video because I know a lot of people out there are posting their plans for 2023 and we all have limited time to watch videos. So let me go through this. In December of 2022, I read 15 books and my average rating was 3.57 stars. I will say I actually read 14 books and 1 Kindle single short story, but I'm gonna count that as a book. Of those 15 books, 6 of them were mysteries, 3 were thrillers, 2 were memoirs, and then there was 1 each of a classic, historical fiction, fantasy, and contemporary fiction. However, the contemporary fiction, when I get to it, could probably maybe fall under fantasy too. We'll see. And of those books, 6 of them were in print, 7 were digital ebooks, and 2 were audiobooks. So, what did I read? I printed out my list and I forgot to say what my ratings were. So I am going to add the ratings onto the screen here. I am clearly not prepared for this video, but here we go. The first book I finished was Sitting Pretty, The View from My Ordinary Resilient Disabled Body by Rebekah Taussig. This book, I did it on audio and I listened to it for a book club, which in the end I wasn't able to make because it conflicted with a friend's birthday. But I did enjoy it. It's a great book to listen to if you aren't really aware of what's going on with in the disability rights movement. Rebekah Taussig is a fun author to listen to, and she does a great job narrating it. The next book I read was actually the second book in a series. I was supposed to read the first book for a book club, but then I decided to just read the second book first. And the book is Girl Gone Missing by Marcie R. Rendon. I was actually discussing Murder on the Red River with the book Cougars, and I meant to reread that one, but I just couldn't help myself, and I just went to the second book. This was a pretty good mystery. The first book, my biggest complaint was I didn't really think the mystery worked, although I loved everything about like the main character and her life as a Native American woman. And you still have that in this book, but you also have a better mystery. So I enjoyed it. It's not, I would say I wouldn't put it on the same level as, say, Louise Erdrich, but it is definitely a series that I'm enjoying and I will continue to read. And then we have the big granddaddy of books this year, which was The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexandre Dumas. I enjoyed it. I'm glad I read it as a slow and steady all year because I don't think I would have gotten through it if I had just sat down to try and like read it cover to cover. But I'm glad I read it. I really enjoyed it. As far as classics go, I think it's very readable. If you aren't someone who reads a lot of classics, you should not have a problem with this. I am a little confused though, because after I finished it, I looked up movie adaptations. And there is a French language miniseries, but beyond that, there's some movie adaptations, but they're all like 90 minutes long. And I'm like, this book is 1,200 pages. So I'm not quite sure how they got that to work. And I'm afraid to watch one. I actually have no plans at this point to watch them, although I might see if I can find the French language miniseries. And then I have another book club book, which was Caramelo by Sandra Cisneros. This was an interesting book to discuss because not everybody liked it in the book club. Actually, I'm the only person who liked it in the book club, and I liked it, but I didn't love it, sort of thing. But it's about a woman, and it's about her family. It's about her grandmother, her father, and then her growing up as Mexican or Mexican American. I don't want to say it's dated because I don't really feel like there's anything in it that's objectionable because it was written at a different time. But you can definitely tell that it was written 20 years ago. Just the way things are in the book. There is hints of magical realism. I think it probably would have been better for some of my book club members if either there was no magical realism or if Sandra Cisneros had like dove deeper into the magical realism, but there was just enough to kind of keep them off kilter a bit. The language was beautiful, and I would be more than happy to read something else by Sandra Cisneros. And I enjoyed it because I identified with a lot of the characters, but my book club members, most of them didn't have the ability to identify. I don't want to say the ability as in they couldn't identify with characters, but there was nothing in the characters in the book that kind of reflected back to anything in their life. for them to use to build some kind of bridge. After that, I have Midwinter Murder, Fireside Tales from the Queen of Mystery. This is a collection of short stories by Agatha Christie. I quite enjoyed it. I liked that there were a couple prose and a couple marples that I skipped because I had recently read the complete short stories of both of those characters. But in this, we also had Harley Quinn and Tommy and Tuppence and Parker Pine. So I was able to kind of like try out some of those other characters of hers. And then she also had some standalone stories as well, which I enjoyed. And I have enjoyed these collections very much. I have one more left to go, which is like it's not a romance collection, but it's short stories that have some kind of romantic element, which is, you know, I don't know. They're murder mysteries, so take that as you are, but I might read that in February. Then I had Murder for Christmas by Frances Duncan, and I heard about this book from Leandra at TBR0. She had talked about it on one of her videos, and I thought, well, that was interesting. So I popped over to Kobo, and it was on sale for like $1. So I picked it up, and I'm like, I'm gonna read this. I thought it was Golden Age. It's actually written, I believe, in 1950, which is after the Golden Age, but it's very much in that tradition. I liked it. It was clearly not the same quality as, say, an Agatha Christie. Agatha Christie frequently has large casts of characters, and this book had a large cast of characters. However, I had a hard time differentiating between the characters for a long time, and I don't usually have that issue in Agatha Christie books. I also felt at the end, there's that scene where the detective, Mordecai Tremaine, that's his name in this book, kind of explains everything that happened. And that happens in Christie stories. It actually happens more in the adaptations of Christie stories, but it does happen from time to time in the Christie stories. And she does that very well. However, in this one, it was just pages and pages and pages of recitation of what happened in the book. And I got really bored with it. So I thought that was really weak. But it was a very Christmassy story, which I like. I don't think it's a spoiler because I kind of tell you in the beginning that the victim is Father Christmas, or at least dressed up as Father Christmas. So it had a lot of holiday feels, which I liked. And then we're going to skip ahead to New Year's because I inadvertently read a New Year's book. I read The Last Party by Clare Mackintosh. Honestly, if I had known it was a New Year's book, I would have probably swapped around my reading a little bit so I would read it closer to New Year's. As I get down the list, there's something on here that I would have read at a different time as well. But this is one of my book of the month books, so it's a relatively new release. It's a thriller. It's set between England and Wales. It was good. I enjoyed it. It was definitely a popcorn thriller, and it was soapy. I'm okay with that. It's light. I wasn't looking for anything really strongly literary. It is the first in a new series. So I'll probably read at least the next one when it comes out to see if it's something I want to continue with or not. But I liked it. It was fine. After that, I finished, and I've talked about this book ad nauseum, so I'm just going to tell you again. I finished Madly Deeply, The Diaries of Alan Rickman, and I loved it. I had to give it a rating because my rating spreadsheet and Goodreads and Story for All That want a rating. So I had to give it a rating, but don't pay attention to that because this is not a book that should be rated. It is what it is. And it didn't make me cry, but in the video where I talked about it, as I was talking about it, I felt myself start to tear up. So, there's definitely something there with this book, but I love it. It's on my keeper shelf. That was a good one. Then I listened to Sadie by Courtney Summers. This is a book that was recommended to me by my TBR way back, like the first month I was with my TBR, maybe first or second month. And I had tried to read it at the time and it wasn't working. And then a lot of people said, no, you have to listen to this one. So I listened to it and that definitely did work better. It's very true crimey, and the format of the book is a podcast, and I'm a big podcast listener, so that really worked for me. All that being said, it is a YA book, and it was kind of a reminder to me why I don't read a lot of YA. I don't think there's anything, inferior about YA. Please don't get me wrong with that. It's just not a genre that's speaking to me right now. So, I probably wasn't the right audience for this book, but I think it was creative, and I would recommend it to someone who's looking for like a YA thriller. I think this could be a good option. Then I read the third Thursday Night Murder Club book, which was The Bullet That Missed by Richard Osman, and it was delightful. Those books are always delightful. I kind of am reluctant to say this because it's going to sound like I'm saying something I'm not. It's probably my least favorite of the three. That is not at all to say that I think it's a bad book. I was charmed by it. I really enjoyed it. It's just that if I had to rank the three books, it would come in third. Still better than a lot of books that I read this year. But it was fun. My biggest problem with it is, if you're familiar with the Thursday Murder Club, there's the group of people who live in the retirement home, and then there's a couple of police officers, and they sort of work together. In this particular book, the police officers are always off sort of to the side. And that kind of, I missed their interactions with the Thursday Murder Club. And that's probably what kept it down at number 3 if I had to rank them. But it's still, I will put my rating here, but I think it was a 4-star. Might have been a 3.5. I don't know, but it was still really good. So I don't want to give off the impression that I didn't like it. And then I read Hercule Poirot's Christmas. I was informed ahead of time that even though this is called Hercule Poirot's Christmas, it's not a Christmassy book. And I'm glad, because I didn't have any expectations of it being very Christmassy going into it. I think had I had that expectation, I would be disappointed. But since I knew it wasn't going to be really Christmassy, I could just read it for what it was. And I enjoyed it. I thought that was a pretty strong Agatha Christie one. I did not get the solution to it, although once the solution was revealed, it made a lot of sense. It was interesting to read it so close to Murder for Christmas because it kind of brought out the flaws in Murder for Christmas. The weaknesses that I found in that book were strengths in Hercule Poirot's Christmas. But I'm glad I read it. I did watch the Poirot television show adaptation afterwards. I actually liked the book better. So anyway, my bookish best friend Shauna also read it. We didn't plan to do a read along or anything. We just ended up reading them at the same time, and she also really enjoyed it. And then I read one of my Yola Boca Flood books. So our family does Yola Boca Flood. I get books for everyone in my family. And then I am part of a gift exchange, so a complete stranger sends books to me because it works out better that way. And I got 2 books. One was I Am by Maggie O'Farrell, which I have not yet read. But the other book was Rock, Paper, Scissors by Alice Feeney. And I'm really glad that I read that when I did because it's very wintry. So if you're looking for a wintry book, this is a good one. This is what I've learned about Alice Feeney by reading the reviews. This is the second book of hers I've read. The first one was Daisy Darker. What I have learned about her is that you either like her or you don't. And there's no in between. I fall into the camp of liking her, although I also understand why people wouldn't like her. So if you have read one of her books and didn't like it, don't pick this book up. But if you have read her books, this is a good one. She's twisty. I think her twists are done pretty well. It's a little popcorn thrillery, but that's okay. It was really entertaining and I enjoyed it. And I read it right after Christmas, so I wanted something fun. And then I had Bleeding Heart Yard, which is the third and most recent book in the Harbinger Carr series by Elly Griffiths. Okay, so I really liked the series. The first 2 books are set in Harbinger's hometown, which I believe is Shoreham, or maybe it's Brighton in England. She is a Sikh detective. She's Sikh and she's a detective. She lives at home with her family, but they don't know she's a lesbian, and there's all this. But the first 2 books had a real literary sense. Like, the first book was a book within a book, and the second dealt with like Golden Age mysteries, and that's really what I liked about this series. Now, the third book is almost a reboot because now Harbinger has moved to London, and she's part of the Met. And this is her first case with the Met, and it's a case of there was a school reunion, and someone ended up dead, and there's a group of friends. The mystery itself is strong. It's a strong mystery. I think it's well crafted. Doesn't have that literary feature that I loved so much in this series. If I look really hard, yes, they quote The Tempest several times. And yes, one of the characters wants to be a writer, but that's as far as it goes. So I felt a little bit robbed with this one. I think the best way to describe it is if you're reading Elly Griffiths, one of her other series, Ruth Galloway, and you read a Ruth Galloway book and there's no archaeology in it, you're like, what happened? That's pretty much how I felt with this one. So I almost think that you would like this better if you hadn't read the first 2 books. And I don't know, maybe Elly Griffiths will go back to the literary hue in future novels in this series, which I hope she does, because I really enjoyed it. And as I said, this was a good mystery. So I just felt disappointed because it wasn't what I expected. So the next book is actually my Kindle single short stories. I have a bunch of these on my phone that I just kind of like pull out whenever I want something quick to read. And I read this yesterday because I'm trying to finish up everything that I read. And it's The Shortest Day by Colm Tóibín. I hope I pronounced that correctly, and I'm sorry if I didn't. I've never read him before, although I have really wanted to read Brooklyn for a long time. This is a short story about, there's an archaeologist in Ireland, and he has heard about that there is a like ancient burial site, like a cave, that on the winter solstice, it lights up. It's designed so that the sun hits it a certain way and it lights up, and that's the only day you get light in there. So he's gonna go check it out on the winter solstice. However, the spirits who live in that cave, they kind of live for that day where they get their light. And then they find out that this professor is coming and they're very worried about it. It's a short story, but I really enjoyed it. This is the book I wish I'd read at a different time though. I wish I had read it on the winter solstice. And if this sounds like something you'd want to read, make a note to yourself to get it from Audible, the audiobook from Audible, or the ebook from Amazon, because unfortunately those are the only 2 places you can get it. So that you can listen to it or read it on the winter solstice, because I really think that's the way you should do it. In fact, next year I may bring it out again on the winter solstice, but it was just a delightful little short story that introduced me to an author I'd been interested in. So yeah, I'm glad I read that one. And finally, my last book of the year was The Fortunes of Jaded Women by Carolyn Wynne. This was another Book of the Month Club for me, Book of the Month Club book. And I'd heard really good things about it. So, and there are things I liked about this book, but I'm not sure I'm the right reader for it. So this is a little bit of an absurd book, and I'm going to give you a scene that happens really early in the book. This is not a spoiler, but this happens. And if this just sounds too over the top to you, then don't pick up this book. It's 3 60-something-year-old Vietnamese women, they're sisters, who get in a full-body physical food fight in a dim sum restaurant. That sounds too crazy for you. Don't worry about this book. Just don't listen to it, but because it's kind of keeps on going with that. There's a lot of like, this book deals with a lot of forgiveness and mother-daughter relationships and sister relationships and what I might call generational trauma, although that's not quite right. It's not really traumatic. And the conflict between being a Vietnamese American and being a Vietnamese American. There are a lot of characters in this book. I think that there's 15. And a lot of them are very one-dimensional. And that sounds like it would be a turnoff. However, I think when you have that many characters, you're better off having most of them be kind of one-dimensional and kind of play off it that way. So that worked. However, I had a really big problem with this book. I am very wary of coincidences in literature. I think that I give a book one coincidence. Like they can have one coincidence and that's fine because lots of times it's the coincidence that builds the plot. This book, shall we say, had more than one coincidence. I'm not going to say how many because that would be a spoiler, but it had too many coincidences and none of them were that important. And it just really annoyed me to the point that it took me out of the enjoyment of the book. That may be a weird thing that only bothers me. I don't know. I read, after I finished it, I read some reviews of it and some people really liked it. So I don't know. But for me, that just didn't quite work. But you know what? I gave the book to a friend today and I thought, you know what? I think that she would really like this book. So hopefully it works for her. She says she's going to read it on the plane when she does a trip coming up. So we'll see. Anyway, those were my 15 books for December. I will do a January wrap up in early February. Until then, I hope you have a great reading month. That's what I'm trying to say. So if you enjoy this video, please like and subscribe. And then if you follow through to the end of the video, you will see everywhere you can find me on social media. Thank you so much, and I'll talk to you later.